Hello and welcome to the JSA Studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with the NFC North draft grades. But before we get into the first team on that list, which is the Chicago Bears, I would like to ask you to like this video, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out the channel if you did. And now, with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's let's get started. The Chicago Bears are the first team that we are going to be talking about today. And we're going to start with pick 1-1, Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC. I really like Caleb Williams. He is my highest graded quarterback ever, which is since 2016 in this case, because that's when I started grading players. I think he is going to come in year one and push to be a Pro Bowl caliber football player at the quarterback position. I don't really think there's going to be a whole lot of learning curve or rookie sort of struggles for him. I really genuinely think he's going to be a fantastic football player for the Chicago Bears year one, and he has a very good chance to shatter every single passing record that the Chicago Bears have in year one as a rookie. My grade for that grade is, in fact, a B. And the reason it's a B, even though I just was hyping him up so much, is because of how I grade picks. Effectively speaking, a B is a pick at value. You took the best player in the class with the first pick of the draft. That is a pick at value. Now, those are individual grades, and the reason that a pick at value is B is because there is still a scenario where he exceeds that. If Caleb Williams does what I think he's going to do in the NFL, then this is an A-plus pick. But for right now, it's a pick at value, meaning you did good. So the grade is a B. Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington, was the 9th overall pick of this draft. I thought that if Rome Odunze was not here at 9, you probably look to trade back. I know that the Raiders were looking to trade up potentially for Michael Penix Jr. Now, Michael Penix obviously went at 8, but I sort of pegged that as a realistic sort of trade down spot. You only had, I think, 4 picks heading into the draft, and then you traded back into the draft to have your 5th pick. But you didn't end up trading down, and that's because Rome Odunze was there. I felt like this was a very realistic possibility that Rome Odunze was going to go at 9. I thought his absolute floor was probably 10 to the Jets, but I didn't necessarily believe he was going to make it past you unless you traded down. And I do think that Rome Odunze was the only player that you were likely to stick and pick for. There were also reports that you were maybe even trying to trade up for him, which would not have been a very good decision in my mind, because I like the rest of your draft, and you likely wouldn't have had these picks if you had traded up for him, and also you got him at 9, so you didn't need to trade up for him. Rome Odunze is absolutely fantastic. He's a prototypical X-receiver, physical on the outside, can grab the ball. You now have maybe the perfect wide receiving core in terms of this is an X receiver, this is a Z, and this is a slot receiver to go along with a prototypical Y tight end in Cole Kmet. This is a offense that is going to do wonderful things next year. The offensive line is still, I would consider, above average. I think they're probably ranked in the NFL somewhere between 16 and 12. However, they do have the potential to get better with improvements along the offensive line that were made, and also just a year 2 from Darnell Wright. I expect him to get better. And also there is a 3rd round pick here at that position. But before we can talk about that pick, the grade for Rome Odunze is another B. And that's because this is a pick at value. I had a top 10 grade on Rome Odunze, and you got him at 9, which is inside the top 10. So this is a pick at value for me. I really, really, really like it. And obviously, if in 3 to 5 years we look back at this and Rome Odunze is a multi-time Pro Bowl or All-Pro style of player, then this pick is going to rise in grade. And a big reason for why a pick at value is a B is so that they have that room to go higher. If I had given both of these grades A+ with these first two picks, then all you can really do is set yourself up for disappointment with those picks. Like if Rome Odunze just ends up being like a Marquise Colston 1,000-yard receiver as a number 2 option behind DJ Moore, that's still a fantastic player and probably a pick at value. But if I gave it an A+, you're thinking this is going to be a superstar and all that sort of stuff. So I give them B grades when it's a pick at value, so they have that room to maneuver upwards and exceed even that potential that I'm expecting them to hit. In the third round at pick 75, you drafted Karan Amagaji, a tackle out of Yale. I am going to be completely honest with you. I really, really like this pick. I like that you are getting a potential replacement and upgrade for Braxton Jones, who has just a ton of upside. I loved Amagaji. I think he's a fantastic prospect. I had a top 75 grade on him. You got him at pick 75. I'm actually going to give this grade a B+, because you did get him at the last pick of quote-unquote value in my grading system. So I'm just going to give you a B+. And I think that Amagaji is going to be your starting left tackle of the future probably after this year. I think Braxton Jones is likely to be a quality backup / swing tackle at this point. Didn't really see the improvement that I wanted to see out of him this year from last year. So I really like Amagaji. I like his potential, and I do think he has legitimate franchise left tackle upside. Now, whether or not he hits that potential is another conversation. But as it stands right now, this is a B+ grade for me. Troy Taylor, a punter out of Iowa, is the next pick. I don't have a problem with drafting punters and kickers and primarily special teams players, even long snappers, on day 3 of the draft. I really don't care. If the player is really, really good, then it's worth the draft pick. And I think Troy Taylor is going to be a very good punter at the next level because he was a very good punter in college. Although sometimes they just don't work out for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe the pressure or the speed of the people coming at them is different and they get freaked out. I don't know. But I do think Troy Taylor is a good pick. It's a little bit before value for me, so it is a tiny bit of a reach. Generally speaking, I would look to start drafting special teams only players in the 5th round. The 4th round is kind of where I'm looking for players who are either just athletes at this point or players who are core special teamers but can also provide some value in specific roles on offense or defense. So it's a tad bit before value for me. So I'm giving this pick a B-. But it's not so much because he's a punter, but rather so much that just because I do think the position probably should just wait until the 5th round. It's not that big of a deal. Like I said, this is only a B- because it's just before value, in my opinion. Your last pick, which you did trade back into the draft to give up future assets for, so that is taken into account in my grading system here. And that pick is Austin Booker, an edge out of Kansas. I really, really like Austin Booker at this point in his career. He's just an athlete, but he has tremendously high upside. He is someone who I think has double-digit sack and 50 pressures a year potential in him. He was my number 10 edge in the entire draft class, and you got him in the 5th round. I had a top 100 grade on him, which would technically mean you got him 2 rounds after value, because I would have a 4th round, and then a 5th round would be that 2nd round. So I think this is a tremendous pick. I would give it an A+, but you did give up future assets to get it. So this pick is an A for me. If you want to see the overall draft class grade, you can either skip to the end of the video where that is, or you can stick around, watch the other teams and what I think about them, and then go to the end and compare all 4 teams in this division. Next team on the list is the Detroit Lions, and I love this draft class for the Lions. Full disclosure, I am a Lions fan. Although I primarily talk about college football on this channel, I am a diehard Detroit Lions fan. But I'm not a homer. You can go back to last year's draft and listen to my opinion on their draft last year in order to see that. I'm not a homer. When they do things I don't like, I talk about them doing things that I don't like. And this year, they didn't do things that I didn't like. I like every single one of these picks. Starting with Terrion Arnold, you trade up for him, you move up, you give up your 3rd round pick, but you also get my number 3 corner in this draft class. That being said, if I was the Detroit Lions and they run that hybrid sort of off-man, press-man primarily sort of scheme, he would have been my number 1 corner. So they probably got their number 1 corner in the draft, and also another corner that I liked a lot in the 2nd round, but we're going to talk about Terrion Arnold right now. I had a top 20 grade on Terrion Arnold, meaning that his quote-unquote value in my grading system is from picks 11 to 20. And in this case, drafting him at 24 is in fact a pick after value. So my grade for this pick is a B+, because it is kind of close to that grade, but it does address a massive need for them, which is not, generally speaking, how I grade the picks, if they address needs or not. I don't really take that into account. It's really just where did I have the player graded, and then where they are taken. Arnold is very good in man coverage off or press. He is a little bit small. I do think he might struggle with players like a DK Metcalf or DeAndre Hopkins, who are very, very physical and sort of those prototypical X wide receivers. However, the Lions, or at least right now, have another corner who is better suited to deal with those sort of players. Terrion Arnold, I think, also might be someone that plays in the slot a bit more than people are anticipating. Because right now, the Lions really, really like to have 3 safeties, and safeties that can do multiple things. Right now, Brian Branch in nickel is likely going to be the starting slot defender, and then you have Kirby Joseph and Ife Melifonwu as your 2 safeties. However, often when they went dime this past season and in years past, that 4th defensive back was usually a safety. And I think in situations like that, they might kick Arnold into the slot to cover Branch, who then goes back and actually plays a safety position rather than pretty much exclusively playing in the slot this past season. So don't be surprised if you see him on the inside more than you're expecting to see him this year. Although I do think probably the majority of the time he's likely going to be on the outside. Moving on to Ennis Rakestraw. He was my number 5 corner that I had in this draft class. The reason I didn't end up having a 1st round grade on him, I had a top 50 grade on him, was because of the combine running. With Arnold, him hitting 4.5 flat, which is what I think he ran at the combine, or at least something close to the lower 4.5s. That wasn't that big of a deal for me, because that wasn't really a problem on tape, because he's a downhill kind of player for me. And if he gets beaten press coverage, he's already fucked anyway. It doesn't matter if you have a safety there or not. So having makeup speed as a press corner is not that important to me. For Rakestraw, him running slow is a bigger concern for me, and that's what ultimately kept him from having a first round grade for me. Instead, I had a top 50 instead of a top 40, which is the last grade where I would take you in the first round. That being said, pick 61 is in fact after value. So this is another pick that I actually really like for the Lions. I think he needs a little bit of work. I don't think he's necessarily someone who's going to come in and play at a high level right away, like I think Arnold is going to do. I think he is someone who's going to need a little bit of time, and the Lions right now have a bunch of veteran corners who are capable of playing right now and letting him develop a little bit this year. Now, there are going to be injuries, and I do think Rakestraw will see significant playing time this year, but I think having Carlton Davis and Emmanuel Mosley and Robertson, the corner we signed from the Raiders, I think having those guys kind of be veteran presence for him to teach him the scheme and to teach him the culture and how to work and all that stuff is going to do him wonders, because he is someone that is going to have to be technically sound at this next level in order to be a starting caliber corner. He's going to have to be really, really, really good technique wise. And I do think he gets there. So my grade for him is another B plus, because this is a pick after value, but it's only quote unquote one round after the value. So this is a B plus pick for me. But overall, the Lions are doing really, really good. Moving on to the fourth round picks here, I'm going to talk about both of them at the same time. We have Giovanni Manu, an offensive tackle out of the University of British Columbia in Canada. And then we also have Sione Vaki, a running back out of Utah that I had graded as a safety. We'll talk more about Vaki in a moment, but we're going to talk about Giovanni Manu. I did not have a grade on him when he was drafted. I hadn't heard of him. However, there isn't a lot of film on him that is accessible online, at least not from the places that I go to find film. All that being said, I was able to look at the athletic profile and I was able to see him play a little bit. So, given the athletic profile and the fact that he's a very, very good athlete, testing anywhere from the high 8.9s in a RAS system to the low like 9.1s in that same system. He's a good athlete for the position. His agility is a concern. I don't believe that the Lions view him as a guard because he's 6'8" and 350 pounds. And the fact of the matter is that guards typically are not that big. And I think he is a developmental, probably right tackle for the Lions after they potentially move on from Taylor Decker after this next season. And given the athletic profile, I probably would have had him graded as a fourth round grade. However, you did give up a future third to move up and get him. And that's a lot to give up, in my opinion. That's quite a bit. And because of that, that is going to push the grade down a little bit, in my opinion, to a B minus, which coincidentally is also the grade that I have for Sione Vaki, the running back out of Utah. My general thoughts on him was, okay, this is a safety that I think has upside as a role player, because I had him graded as safety. I did not have him graded as a running back because I didn't really think anyone was going to draft him as a running back because I thought he was better as a safety than a running back. But the Lions said, no, he's a running back. It is what it is. I had a fourth round grade on him as a safety. And again, you're giving up draft capital to move up to get him in the future. So this is another B minus. I think he has upside as a running back. I question how much that is. But I had a fourth round grade on him as a safety. And that was primarily because of the special teams value. I think he's going to be a core special teams player that is good to potentially even elite, straight up elite special teams player in year one. And that's where the majority of his value is going to come from, in my opinion. And if he can give you something as a third running back or a return person, then that's cool. And that's upside there. But his general value, in my opinion, is going to come from special teams. Moving on to the 6th round here. These are two players that I had graded much, much higher than where they went in the draft. I love Mekhi Wingo's fit in this scheme. He is a 3 technique at the next level, in my opinion. He is likely to get snaps as a rotational pass rusher, even in year one, because I think he has upside like that. He's a very good athlete for the position, tested very well at the combine. I think this is a player that has starting 3 technique upside along the interior defensive line, and to get that in the 6th round is tremendous value. And Christian Mahogany is another guy that I had a very high grade on for this interior offensive line class, and I do really, really like him. I think he probably takes over as your starting right guard after this year, and I think he does so fairly easily. I had a top 100 grade on Mekhi Wingo out of LSU, and a top 75 grade on Christian Mahogany out of Boston College. These are both A-plus picks for me. I think these are both players that are going to be contributors in year one. With Mahogany, it's likely going to take an injury on the offensive line. However, there's always injuries on the offensive line, so like that pick a lot there. That being said, these are both players that I think are going to provide value in year one and potentially are starters by the time year 2 rolls around. I really like both of these players and their fit in Detroit. If you want to see the overall grade for this draft class, you can either skip to the end of the video or stick around through the Green Bay Packers section and the Minnesota Vikings selection, see what I think of their drafts, and then see all 4 of them compared in the last section of this video. Green Bay is on the clock here, and I liked this draft class, particularly the first round pick in Jordan Morgan. Jordan Morgan was my offensive tackle 4 in this draft class. I was much higher on him than the consensus. I had a top 20 grade on him. You got him at 25. That's a pick after value. I think he slots in as your starting left tackle day 1, and I think you're looking at a very, very, very good player with a ton of upside at the left tackle position. I get that that's probably not going to be what the general consensus for this pick is, because I think most people had Jordan Morgan in like the middle of the 2nd round as a sort of a grade. Some people probably said that he needs to move into guard because they don't like the arm length. I don't particularly care about stuff like that all that much. The fact of the matter is that I just really, really love Jordan Morgan as a prospect. He was one of the biggest my guys in this draft class. Grade for him is a B+ because it was a pick after value. Moving on to the 2nd round picks with Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M, and Javon Bullard, the safety/slot corner out of Georgia. I like both of these players a lot. Edgerrin Cooper was my number 1 linebacker in this class. I had a top 40 grade on him, meaning you got him after value. Javon Bullard is a player that I had a top 75 grade on, meaning that his value is from picks 51 to 75, and you took him right smack dab in the middle of that value, so I like that pick as well. I think both of these players are going to be instant contributors on this defense, potentially even year 1 starters. I really, really like these players and their fit in that defense that you guys are running. The grades for these 2 players are a B+ for Edgerrin Cooper and a B for Javon Bullard, as they were picked slightly after value in the case of Cooper and at value for the case of Bullard. The 3rd round is where things start to get a little bit dicey for me, and that is not the Marshawn Lloyd pick. I actually like this pick a lot for this team. I think Marshawn Lloyd is going to be a instant contributor and a very good running back for this team in year one. I had a top 75 grade on him. You got him at 88. That's after value. Very, very good player, in my opinion. I think if USC had ran a better offense, in my opinion, I think Marshawn Lloyd likely would have gone higher than even this, and I think he probably would have had a higher general consensus sort of grade. However, this next pick is kind of where you begin to lose the plot a little bit for me. Tyron Hopper, a linebacker out of Missouri. I had a 7th round grade on him. I thought that this was likely a player who is a special teams only kind of guy. But even if he wasn't going to be a special teams only kind of guy, this is a will linebacker. This is a run and chase linebacker. He's a little bit small, but he's very, very fast, and the athleticism makes up for that. That being said, he does over pursue quite a bit, and you already drafted a much better version of what he could even potentially become in Edridge and Cooper. They play the same position. It's not just that they're linebackers. They play the same role within those positions. They were both going to be weak side run and chase type of linebackers. So I don't really understand the thought process in selecting him here, because you have Quay Walker, who I thought played very well last year as a Mike linebacker. And then now you've got Edridge and Cooper as your will linebacker. And those are the two guys that are likely to be your nickel linebackers as well. So I don't really know what Hopper's role is going to be on this defense, because those are two young players that I think are going to be better than him. This pick is very head scratching for me. There are other picks that I also didn't like, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But for Marshawn Lloyd and Tyron Hopper, my grade for them are a B+ for Lloyd and a C- for Tyron Hopper, who I had a 6th round grade on, not a 7th round grade on. That's my bad. I misspoke and said 7th round grade. And the reason I misspoke and said 7th round grade is because the next player on this list, Evan Willaims, I had a 7th round grade on as a safety. This one I don't get at all. Quite generally, I don't even see the rationale behind making this pick. I don't think he was very good at Oregon. I think he was okay. B, I don't know where he plays on this defense, because he's not someone that you're likely going to move into the slot to be a backup or potentially a developmental guy for Nixon to play under him. If anything, you're going to put Bullard there, but I actually think you're likely going to play Bullard as a free safety as opposed to moving him into the slot, which is where I had him graded. I had him graded as a slot defender. Free safety grade probably would have been the same grade, but I had him graded as a slot. You're likely to play him at free safety, and Willaims is probably going to be his backup there, but I don't like that at all. I get that you didn't have a whole lot of depth at the safety position, but I think there were several other players who were better to be picked here. This is a D grade for me. Moving on to the 5th round here, Jacob Monk and Keaton Oladapo. Safety out of Oregon State and interior offensive lineman out of Duke, respectively. Monk out of Duke, I think, could be a potential starting guard or center 2 or 3 years from now. I like the athletic upside. I think he is versatile. I think he could play left guard, center, or right guard if you ask him to do those things. I thought he was generally underrated on the consensus board. I had a 4th round grade on him, so you got him after value. Oladapo, on the other hand, is another player that I don't get. Again, don't particularly understand the thought process behind it. However, I think he has more box upside as opposed to Willaims, who I think is probably just a deep safety at this point in his career. So maybe you're looking for depth there. Again, I understand you didn't really have a whole lot of depth at the safety position and kind of needed a starting safety, but you took Bullard, and outside of that, I think, again, there were better players to take here than Oladapo, who were on the board still. The Monk pick is a B plus for me, and the Oladapo grade is a D, as I had him graded as a priority undrafted free agent. Moving on to the 6th round here, you have Travis Glover, an offensive tackle out of Georgia State, and you have Michael Pratt, a quarterback out of Tulane. Now we're starting to get back on track here. Travis Glover, I had a 7th round grade on him. You took him in the 6th. Not that big of a deal. Little bit of a reach on my board, but at this point, it's a 6th round pick. He's a developmental offensive tackle, could kick into guard as well. You can never have too much depth along the offensive line. I think it's solid. It's okay, in my opinion. Michael Pratt, on the other hand, I think has legitimate quality backup quarterback written all over him. I think he's someone who could come in and tread water for 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks. You end up 2-2 in those games, and he plays okay, so that your starting quarterback can come back if they have something like a pulled hamstring or they dislocate a finger or something, and they're only going to miss a couple of weeks. I think that is a very, very good pick for this team. The grade for Glover is a B minus. The grade for Pratt is an A. Last pick of the draft, Kalen King. I'm just going to tell you right now, the grade for him is a B. You're taking a chance on what you saw 2 years ago in that scheme that Penn State runs, as opposed to what you saw this year. Maybe he can be that player. Maybe he can't. It's a 7th round pick, and not only that, it was the 3rd to last pick of the draft. He's from Detroit, so I was happy to see him get drafted. But outside of that, I don't know, man. It's a shot in the dark. Maybe he turns into something. If not, who cares? He was a 7th round pick. The grade's a B. And as is the case with the last 2 groups here, if you want to see the grade for the total draft class, you can go ahead and see that at the end of this video. You can skip to that selection, or you can stick around through the Minnesota Vikings section and then see what I have to say about all 4 draft classes. Up next is the Minnesota Vikings, and their first pick was number 10 overall. They traded up 1 spot to select J.J. McCarthy, quarterback out of Michigan. My quarterback this past year, national championship winning quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. There's a lot to like about J.J. McCarthy. The problem is I think he needs to sit for preferably the whole year, but realistically, at least like the first 10 games or so, because there are going to be some growing pains with him as the starting quarterback. He was not asked to throw the football very much in either a complicated scheme, because it was very simplistic, a lot of easy one-sided reads, or pretty much they knew where they were going to throw the ball beforehand sort of situation. Really struggled in moving off of the first read and when working outside of the numbers. Some of that is that he doesn't have the arm to drive the ball 30 yards on a line outside the numbers. Some of that is the footwork got a little bit sloppy, and some of that is experience. And this is someone that I would label as a project quarterback, but he is the safest project quarterback maybe in the history of the NFL. We know the work ethic is there. We know the leadership is there. The physical talent is all there. It checks every box. He doesn't have an elite trait in terms of physical traits, in my opinion, but everything is good to great at a minimum, and the intangibles are elite. I do think he is going to be at least starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. I don't think Jordan Love is a bad comparison, not necessarily in the fact that he has to sit for 3 years in order to become a starting quarterback. Just in terms of physically, I think he's a good comp for him. I had a top 20 grade on J.J. McCarthy. You took him at 10, which is technically before value, but I don't really care. I'm going to give this a grade of a pick at value, which is, in fact, a B. Pick 17, Dallas Turner. He was my edge 3. I was not as high on him as other people were. I had Laiatu Latu graded higher than him, and I also had Jared Verse graded higher than him. But I did have him graded as a top 20 grade. Generally speaking, especially earlier on in the draft, I don't really care who you draft the player over. I care about the value of where I have them graded and where you picked them. And I had a top 20 grade on Dallas Turner. You took him inside the top 20. I think he is someone who might struggle a little bit in run defense early on in his career before he can kind of figure out how to win without just being a better athlete than everybody else, which is how he won in the run game this past year at Alabama. However, the upside is evident as a speed rusher. He is going to need to develop some counter moves, but I don't really think that's going to be a problem for him. He's got borderline elite get off, a fantastic bend around the edge. This is someone who I think is going to be productive year one as primarily a pass rushing specialist. And maybe you could use him as sort of a weak side defensive end sort of situation. However, I do think he fits Brian Flores' scheme very well. And I think he is someone who is in year 2 likely to take a big step forward and kind of quote unquote break out that next step. This is a pick at value for me. I really like the fit, and I think he's going to be a good player. So the grade is a B. Up next is the 4th round pick, Kyrie Jackson, a corner out of Oregon. I had a top 75 grade on Kyrie Jackson. A, I think he fits the scheme really well. B, I was way higher on him than the consensus, so I don't necessarily think you're going to see him graded as high as I have him graded for a lot of people, but I really like Kyrie Jackson. And to get him here, who I think he is going to be a contributor on defense year 1, and I think he's going to be probably a starter by year 2 or 3 in his career and playing really well at that. Needs to be in sort of a press scheme, or at least a scheme where he is not asked to backpedal a whole lot. But I think he does have a ton of upside. I really, really like this pick. This grade is an A for me. Moving on to the 6th round picks here. As I sort of talked about in the Chicago Bears section, I'm fine with drafting special teams only players in sort of the 5th round and beyond. And you took Will Reichard at the 6th round here. I like the fit. I think he's going to be a reliable kicker at the next level. Walter Rouse, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. 6th round pick. I had a 6th round grade on him. So I like the fit. I think he has the potential to develop into a quality swing tackle sort of player. I think he has a decent potential as a backup offensive lineman. Reichard, I do think, is potentially going to be your kicker for this upcoming season and potentially even into the future. Both of these draft picks are graded at a B for me. They were taken at value, in my opinion. And now the 7th round picks. Michael Juergens, offensive tackle out of Wake Forest, who might end up getting moved inside to guard, and Levi Drake Rodriguez, an interior defensive lineman out of Texas A&M University of Commerce. I have to be honest with you. Michael Juergens, I had a 7th round grade on. His grade's B. Don't really need to talk about that. Levi Drake Rodriguez, I'm not going to talk about because I don't know anything about him. I did not have a grade on him. I'm not going to count him as a positive or negative when creating your value of this draft class. Potentially in the future, I might have time to go back and look at him and kind of figure out what he's potentially going to be. I don't know, but for Michael Juergens, that grade is a B. And with that, we are done with all 4 teams. We're going to do a quick little segment where I break down my favorite picks or the best picks from each 4 teams. And then after that, we're going to grade the overall draft classes and rank them in order of best to worst. And if you want to see that, you can go ahead and just skip to that section down below, or you can stick around through the best picks segment and then see the overall grades. the best picks for these four teams. The first 5 picks here: Austin Booker, Mekhi Wingo, Christian Mahogany, Michael Pratt, and Kyrie Jackson were all A grades or better for me, A or A plus. I really like the value that all of these teams got with these picks. Those were the best picks for this division, in my opinion. And also, it's kind of cool that everybody had one. The Lions had 2, but everybody else had at least 1. And then the final 2, Jordan Morgan and Terrion Arnold, were both B plus grades that I just really like because they were 2 players that I think are going to instantly contribute to playoff caliber football teams. These are the best picks. They're not necessarily in any order, in my opinion. In fact, I think Christian Mahogany and Mekhi Wingo were both A pluses, while Austin Booker, Michael Pratt, and Kyrie Jackson were A's. So they're not really in any order. These are just the best picks from the NFC North division. And now, finally, moving on to the rankings of these teams. Green Bay is in last place with a B minus overall grade. You kind of lost the plot, starting with that second, third round pick, and then kind of stumbled a little bit in the later draft before picking it up right again at the end. This is a B minus grade for me. I still like it, which is why it's a B minus grade, but I do think you had opportunities to have a better draft, and I do question the thinking behind a lot of the draft selections, in my opinion. In third place is the Minnesota Vikings. I have them graded as a B plus. Good value. You got 2 of the consensus top 20-ish players in this draft in the first round, as well as some solid value down the board that could potentially develop into contributors in the future. Chicago, I gave an A minus grade to. They are in second place in this division, and since this is the first division that I've graded, they are in second place overall. That being said, however, looking back on this draft class in 4 to 5 years, I expect this to be regarded as one of the best draft classes of all time. And the pick at A minus for me, or the grade rather at A minus for me, has more to do with the fact that 2 players that I do really think are going to be very good and contributors on this team are also massive projects in Amagaji and Booker. If those players hit like I think they're going to hit, then this would be an A-plus draft class. But they are projects, and I do need to see them develop before I can hand out an A-plus grade. The first-place team and the first-place team overall, unlikely to be dethroned, in my opinion, are the Detroit Lions. They didn't make a single bad pick. They didn't reach once. All of their picks were either at or after value. Yes, they gave up some future picks to get those 4th round guys. However, they more than made it up with their final 2 picks. I think all of their selections, every single one of them by year 3, will be contributors, and potentially even all of them starters, or in the case of Sione Vaki, a defined contributor and an elite caliber special teams player. But that's just me, and what do I know, after all? Because I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. And it's at this point that I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now, with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.